Welcome, my darlings, to my humble chateau. Please make yourself very comfortable. Relax your mind and release your imagination to me. I will bring you a story to entrance and entertain. Perhaps a frightening one. Perhaps a steampunk. Perhaps a bit of mythology. Anyway, sit back, enjoy, and subscribe to me. The Officer Sarah Barkley Chronicles, Part 7 by Barkles 52. I couldn't control my facial expression as my jaw dropped. Wait, Michelle Klein was your granddaughter? I knew I was repeating what she just said, but I was still processing this piece of information. Yes, you look surprised. Were you one of the officers who found her? Oh, Rose, yes I was. I'm so sorry for your loss. I guess I always thought she was more of a transient and had no idea that she had family left in the area. Well, I think I'm the only family left here. Michelle's children went to live with their aunt, my daughter, down in Maryland, after we believed she died 20 years ago. I knew Michelle's children were in Maryland because the U.S. Marshals told me they were going to drive down personally to notify her children and tell them how their mother was in a witness protection program all these years. I had so many questions for Rose now. I tried to pace myself. What was your relationship with Michelle like? She was less like a granddaughter and more like a daughter to me. I love Michelle's mother very much. She is my daughter, but she has her flaws. She became heavily involved with the Catholic Church when she married Michelle's father. So when Michelle came home and told them she was pregnant and going to be raising a child alone, they kicked her out of their house. I don't think it was even 6 months before they ended up moving out west to be closer to Alan's family. Alan? Yes, Michelle's father. Oh, sorry. So what did Michelle do when they kicked her out? She had nowhere to go. Samuel and I took her in and helped her through her pregnancy. It wasn't too long after the first one was born that she was pregnant again. We let her stay here, though, her second pregnancy as well. Oh, God, then the accident happened. What accident? Michelle was driving down the road to work. She was a waitress and got hit head-on by a drunk driver. She was 7 months pregnant, and we didn't know if either of them were going to make it. I think that night took years off my life. I cringed as the scene of the accident ran through my mind. Oh, that is so terrifying. Yes, it was, Rose replied. As I'm sure you can figure out, they both made it. They performed an emergency cesarean section, and Michelle suffered a severe brain injury. But with therapy and the right doctors, she made a full recovery. I was dying to know how Michelle ended up at Patch Lane. And when did she move out of your home? Oh, let me see. Probably about 10 months after the accident. I know it wasn't a full year yet. She ended up starting her own business and made more than twice what she made as a waitress. Being that this is such a small town, everyone knows who owns each local business. I was surprised to hear Michelle started her own business. I'd never heard of her or her business. What business did she start? Rose's eyes widened slightly and she inhaled deeply. Well, now, that's an interesting story that might take us a while. I was so engrossed in Rose's information, I leaned closer. I have time, Rose. All right. Well, after Michelle's accident, she didn't feel the same. She started experiencing strange things no one could explain. I wasn't sure where Rose was going with this. Like medically? No, not like that. She started having thoughts, memory-like thoughts that weren't really memories, and had never happened to her. She would be confused on why she randomly had that thought, and then within a day's notice, her vision would come true. This conversation was not going where I thought it was. However, I was still intrigued, and I could tell Rose felt embarrassed because she knew how all of this sounded. Rose continued. I know how this all must sound. If it weren't for seeing it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it either. I couldn't help myself and asked, what exactly did you see with your own eyes? I'll never forget her first vision. We were all in the family room playing cards and unwinding since she got home from work. Out of nowhere, she started crying. At first, I thought it was hormones since it wasn't that long after her second child. She said she didn't know why she was crying, but quickly started rocking back and forth in her seat. She kept repeating, no, 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 this isn't happening. This isn't real. I started crying just at the sight of her. Samuel had no idea whether he should console her or sit back. He just stared in disbelief. I held her for nearly 20 minutes until she could finally speak. She said someone she loved was dead. I assured her everyone was okay, but she just kept saying, someone's dead. I had goosebumps up my arms. So what happened? We finally got her calmed down and put her to bed. It wasn't even 7 a.m. when I woke up to the phone ringing. Samuel answered it, and I'll never forget his face. I never have seen so much pain in his eyes as that very moment. He slowly lowered the phone and grabbed my hand. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me Mary, Michelle's sister, overdosed last night. I had no words, no response. Suddenly, everything around me felt more vivid. The rain outside sounded like it was knocking on the window to come inside. I didn't even notice it was raining until now. I stared at Rose's face and could see every line on her forehead, every wrinkle on her cheek. I noticed my breathing slow. I don't even believe in this stuff, but I almost felt frozen in time as I absorbed everything Rose was telling me. Rose took a sip of a glass of water and didn't let the silence bother her. She continued. And ever since then, they only got clearer and more precise. It eventually came to the point where she could tell us who was calling before we picked up the phone. It became normal to us, and we treated it like a game. This gift has really changed her. When we were walking through the park one evening, Michelle felt a heaviness on her chest that she couldn't shake. I was concerned she was having a heart attack because of how she was acting. She somehow knew this wasn't medical and said she was feeling a spirit connecting to her. Rose closed her eyes and relived the moment. Oh, Michelle had me so worried. I held on to her, and after a few minutes passed, she opened her eyes and began crying hysterically. She told me a little girl was buried there. She would not let it go, and we eventually called the police out. There was a nice officer working that evening who listened to every word Michelle told him and never rolled his eyes once. You know, I think he had something in his own life. That he was a believer long before we called him. He decided to get a shovel and start digging on his own before calling for backup. Given the circumstances, it took him about 15 minutes, but he eventually found a trash bag. He stopped digging and didn't even open the bag before calling for backup, and started wrapping police tape around the park. I felt like a child during this story time. I couldn't stop asking questions. So was there a body? What was in the bag? Rose let out a sigh. Oh yes, there was the body of a young girl. That's a sight I'll never forget. The police questioned Michelle, but it didn't take them long to rule her out as a suspect, and they slowly started using her for help with other cases. I tried to draw all of these pieces of information together and figure out how it could possibly relate to Patch Lane. I asked, how did Michelle eventually end up living at Patch Lane? Samuel and I didn't want Michelle to move out. We were concerned that her and the kids' safety, and we really loved them having them here. But Michelle felt it was important to be an independent mother for those children and started searching for a safe but affordable home. She looked mostly in this area so that we could help with watching the kids. One day she was at the corner store grabbing some milk and saw a paper taped to the bulletin board of a house for rent. It was surprisingly affordable and not far from our cabin, so she left the store and drove straight to the house on Patch Lane. She became immediately drawn to the house like a moth to a flame. As soon as she got home, she called the number on the paper and said she would take it. Imagine my surprise when I got home that evening and she told me she was moving into the old house on Patch Lane. Everybody around here knows the story of that old farm, but somehow these stories never got to Michelle. What happened after she moved into Patch Lane? Moving into that house was a blessing and a curse. She finally gained the independence that she so desperately sought, but it came at a price. The visions became overwhelming. She barely slept at night. The visions became so intense that the line between reality and visions was slowly fading. She always talked about hearing a spirit telling her she needed to check out the basement. She found that old door with the lock on it and even called Samuel over one day and asked him to help her remove the lock. Now, you know, we're old-fashioned here and we don't go snooping into other people's business. Samuel told Michelle not to go snooping and told her to mind her own business. He refused to help her open that lock. She didn't know how to open it herself without cutting it with bolt cutters, which wasn't an option since she didn't want the landlord to find out. I remember that when I first approached Patch Lane, I still saw the rusty lock on the door, so there was no way she could have gotten into that basement room unless she found the underground tunnel. I asked, so then, how did she eventually get into that room? Oddly enough, she wasn't the one that found the root cellar passage. It was her kids. One day they were playing in the yard and started jumping on something. The loud clink of metal got Michelle's attention, and she ran over to find the root cellar door. She put the kids inside and went back to the root cellar. She opened the door, walked down the stairs, and through the tunnel. She came to a hatch, and she opened it. She found herself in that locked room in the basement. She called me immediately after she found that room. I remember it as clear as day. A single tear made its way down Rose's cheek, making a path straight over each wrinkle. Rose added, as soon as Michelle got into that room, she had the worst vision yet. She saw her own death. The rain turned into a monsoon. I heard thunder rumble in the distance, followed by lightning less than 2 seconds apart. I was taking a sip of water and trying to imagine what it would be like to envision my own death. Before I could even ask any further questions, Rose continued. That was really when things got bad. Michelle found things in that room she shouldn't have, and she wanted to go to the police. But for some reason, she said she didn't know if she could trust them. Instead, she went straight to the feds. Well, you know where it went from there. I had a thought rush into my head. Rose, do you know who the father of Michelle's children is? Rose nodded her head and said, Yes, I do. Who? I asked. Rose took a deep breath. He was a cook at the restaurant Michelle worked at. He would force himself on her, and she just didn't say no. That job was the only thing she had for quite some time, and she was worried if she said anything that she would end up being the one in trouble. In a town this small, there weren't many jobs for her to choose from. My heart ached for Michelle. I can't believe she had to go through that. Oh, Rose, I'm so sorry. That must have been so hard for her. All we could do was try and help her. She even started trusting men again and started dating someone right around the time she moved to Patch Lane. But she was very secretive about his identity. All she told us was he was a good man and would be a great father to her kids if things went in that direction. So, dispatch interrupted me. Dispatch to all units. Dispatch to all units. Please respond to River Road for flash flooding. We just received 6 calls coming in that the river has risen past the roads and the barricades need to be put up. 10:45. Show me en route. Of course, Tim is one of the first to respond. 10:45. Show me en route. Of course, Tim was one of the first to respond. He's one of the most active officers we have. Shortly later, I heard the rest jump on the radio. 10:39, on my way. 10:52, en route. I joined. 10:34, you can show me leaving Old Schoolhouse and I'll be en route. I turned to Rose. Rose, I have so many more questions for you. Would you mind if I stop back over tomorrow night? Rose gently threw both hands in the air. Oh, of course. You're welcome back here anytime, Sarah. I hope you don't think I'm just some crazy old lady. I assured Rose that I believed everything she told me, and I would love to come by tomorrow night. She walked me to the door and handed me a hot mug of coffee. You can bring the mug back tomorrow when you see me. I thanked Rose and headed down to River Road to start damage control. It took me almost 15 minutes to get there because of how quickly the roads flooded. I arrived on scene and we were all able to barricade the flooded road to prevent any vehicles from falling victim to the rising waters. I was on scene of various flooding incidents until the end of my shift. I was beyond soaking wet, and the first thing I did when I got home was strip naked and take a hot shower. Haley's new thing was to sit on the toilet and watch me the entire time I shower. At first, I thought it was creepy, but then I started to think she was concerned I was drowning every time I showered, because she just looked so concerned as she sat there. I got out of the shower and gave Haley one of her bad time treats. I lay in bed, scratching her until we both fell asleep. Ring, 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 ring. What the hell? My alarm wouldn't shut off. Then I realized it was my phone. I answered in a groggy voice. Hello? Hey, Sarah, it's Dad. I'm sorry, did I wake you? Yeah, but it's fine. Is everything all right? Oh, yeah, I'm fine, but the basement's flooded pretty bad. I was hoping you could stop by here for a few hours before you go back to work tonight and help me move all these boxes upstairs. I never say no to my dad. I'm a daddy's girl, and we've always had each other's back. Of course, Dad. I'll be right over. Do you want me to grab lunch for us? Pizza? You read my mind, sweetie. I pulled up to my dad's house and carried the pizza inside. He came upstairs and we each scarfed down a couple of slices before heading downstairs to tackle this disaster. He had already done a lot of the heavy lifting by himself, which, of course, I didn't like. Dad, you should have waited until I got here to do all this. Don't worry, I still saved a lot for you. Can you help me carry all of these cardboard boxes in this corner? Just set them all in the family room. I began carrying the boxes up one by one. I came across one box labeled Teresa and couldn't help myself but to open it. It was all old photographs and clothing of my mom's. My dad saw me going through the photographs and came over and took some from my hands. He sat down and quietly admitted, I miss her so damn much. Do you realize how much you look like her? Whenever someone tells me I look like my mother, it's the best compliment I could ever receive. I don't care about being called pretty or gorgeous, but when I'm told I look like her, I can't help but smile. I know, Dad. I miss her too. It's hard to believe it's been over 20 years. We talked about our memories and we agreed that we should probably go visit her grave later today to make sure the flooding didn't damage the cemetery or the flowers that we keep around her site. I gathered myself and started carrying more boxes back upstairs. By about my fourth trip up, one of the boxes was so saturated that the bottom broke and the items spilled all over the stairs. I started picking up old uniform shirts of my dad's and some sports memorabilia that he had tucked away. When I picked up one of the uniform shirts, a photograph fell out. I picked it up to see if it was another picture of my mother, and to my surprise, it wasn't. It was a photograph of me when I was about 5 years old or so, standing next to a woman I found very familiar at a carnival or fair. Within the 2 seconds my brain was processing who was in the photograph, my dad came over and snatched the photo from my hand. "What are you doing?" he yelled. This was not like my dad at all. I was so confused. "Dad, I looked again at the photograph he was holding in his hand. The wires in my brain finally connected. I knew who the woman in the picture with me was. It was Michelle Klein. So quoth this raven. Well, my dears, the mystery continues to unwind and wind wonderfully. I will have more for you next week. There's still so many parts to read, so I will keep you updated, and please give me a little comment, and I'll do my best to comment back. If you want some merch, go check that out. And I'll see you next time, my darlings. Bye-bye.